hey, this is gonna be a brief overview of how to use a Concept 2 rower. So I'm gonna go over how to get set up on it, how to actually perform the stroke, and then we'll go over a little bit of stuff on the monitor about how to set up your timer for the rows. So if you're doing intervals or if you're doing a single long row, you know how to set that so it counts down, and then you can go into the memory at the end of your workout and get those results so that you can submit them and we can keep track of your progress more accurately. So the first thing with the setup, we want to look at the pedals. These little guys right here are called the pedals. So they adjust up and down, and where you want to have them is such that this strap comes right across your metatarsals. So that's the first bone right after your toes. So if you imagine on your hand here, it's the first bone after these large knuckles right here, but in your foot. So that's where we want to set up. In terms of the damper, which is this slider right here, when it's up at 10, it's going to let a lot of air into the fan, so you're going to feel a heavy sense of resistance on this. And so if you're over 220 pounds, if you're doing a high-paced sprint where you're trying to do a max wattage for 20 seconds, something like that, it's going to be better to be up very high. If you're doing something more aerobic, you're going to want to be down here around this like 5, 4, 3 kind of area. Because if you think about when you're running, if you're doing like an aerobic jog, so you're going to do a 5K, which is a pretty fast-paced 20-minute run, 15 to 25-minute run, depending on who you are. For most regular folk, you're not going to want to put on combat boots. You're not going to want to wear ankle weights on that 5K run. So by the same token, a lot of people feel like they want to feel a heavy sense of resistance so they can have something to pull against on the rower, but that's actually counterproductive to developing aerobic capacity. There are some considerations depending on the type of muscle makeup you have, the way you process oxygen within your body, where you may want to kind of mess with this damper setting more specifically as you become a more experienced rower, but just take it as a good generalization, a good rule of thumb, that when we're doing aerobic work, 500-meter repeats, 60-minute test row, stuff like that, that we want to be around this 5, 4, 3 kind of damper setting, depending on your body weight. So that's the general setup with the row. Let's talk about how to actually do that stroke next. So I'm going to get myself set up here. I'm going to strap myself in tight. And so actually, let's back up a little bit. Before I even strap myself up, let's look at this rail right here. A lot of times people don't realize that this rail is on a slant, and so knowing this rail is on a slant and knowing that if I just sit here and relax, I'm going to slide back in is going to play into the technique that we want to use for this rower, right? If this rail was on a slant upwards, then I would have to actively pull myself in each stroke. But because this rail is on a slant, if I can just get my body weight forward, it's naturally going to slide back in. And so that's a free ride, that's free energy that we can use to be efficient as we come back in on the rower. So let's take a look at how that works in practice. I'll get my feet strapped in here, grab my handle, and so from the top of the row is where I like to kind of get my setup from. So here I'm going to try to sit up nice and tall, have my arms nice and straight, relaxed, loose, so that chain is nice and straight. And from here, I'm just going to lean forward. And so after I lean forward, if I kind of relax my knees, I'll naturally, boom, just kind of glide right up to the front. And so this is the catch position. So here in this catch position, a couple things we want to think about. This shin should be nice and vertical. If you have some of the old rowers, there's actually pictures right here on the frame of the rower that shows these different positions I'm going to go over right now. This one's a little newer, so it doesn't have that sticker on it. But we want this shin nice and vertical. We want our hips behind our shoulders. And we want our chest up so that we can push with our legs. So from this catch position, I'm going to push with my legs, keep my hips behind me, and as I start to get out to the top, then I'm going to start to lean back, snap that handle to my chest, and let it go back right away. And then rowing is literally just repeating that with a nice rhythm, getting your breathing in sequence and feeling comfortable. So we'll do it a couple more times super slow, and then I'll show you what it looks like in more of a natural pace, and then I'll go over some of the common mistakes after that. So tall, we hinge forward to get our weight in front, and then just let those knees break nice and easy. Get to my catch position here, vertical shin, hips behind the shoulders, and then I'm gonna push. Let that handle snap at the top. Reclaim my position. This will be the last slow one. Hit my catch, drive, finish, reclaim my position. So as I'm going in and out really low right now, obviously this handle's moving super straight, but as I pick up the pace, I wanna have that same straight handle, and I wanna minimize the flap and chain, right? If you've seen some really aggressive people row, you've probably heard them row with the chain flapping around, but that's wasting energy. If we can be straight in, straight out, that's gonna be most efficient, and so that means all the work we do is gonna get counted on this monitor rather than just doing a bunch of work that doesn't register on our meters or calories. Because if you're rowing, I mean, that's what you want, right? We're rowing for a distance, we're rowing for an amount of calories, we're rowing for an amount of time, and we want it to show on the results once we're done. So I'm gonna go a little bit faster, just kind of go at a natural pace without talking so you can see what the rowing stroke looks like. I'm gonna hit my vertical shin position, keep my hips behind my shoulders until the top when I snap, and reclaim my position each time as I finish that pull and go to come back in and start the next pull. So here we go. Cool. So that's a general stroke. I'm rowing like a 148 pace there. 29 strokes per minute. It's kind of just a general aerobic pace, but you should be able to see, if you rewind the video, that every time from the top, I reclaim my position. As I come in, I keep my hips behind me and I snap, and that chain stays nice and level. Hands are going straight to the front to back. Since we're not in water, we don't need to worry about like getting the oars out of the water, anything like that. We can just pump in and out on this machine. That's gonna work best. So this will lead us into how not to row. So when we're rowing, what we don't wanna do is get to the front here in this beautiful catch position and then shift our hips under us, and then we do this like craned neck, leaning out thing. So this is really common when you just haven't learned to row correctly, or if you have weak legs, right? If you have weak legs, you're not gonna like this sensation of having your hips behind you, because when you drive out, you're gonna have to push with your quads and they're gonna have to do the work. So when we get here, if you lean back, that's gonna take a lot of work off the legs, and that's gonna be like a more resting kind of pull that is actually, if you find yourself in a pinch in some like random CrossFit workout where you're getting your ass kicked and you need to rest your legs because you know you have to get off the rower and do a bunch of cleans, that can serve you well. But for our purposes right now, just for like quality rowing technique, this guy with the hips under us and leaning back early is gonna be incorrect. It's gonna be bad technique. So we wanna try to avoid that as much as possible. Another issue that I see a lot of from the top is letting those hips come back too soon and never reclaiming our forward position. So what that looks like is this. Cool. So you can see that as I get out to the top, I never really finish a good strong pull, and I'm coming back in with my butt ahead of me. I have to pick my hands up over my knees, which causes that chain to flap. And so this is just bad. Never a good time to row like that. We'll see this a lot with just newer athletes who've never been taught. But this is just terribly inefficient. You're gonna do a lot of strokes per minute, so you're gonna get quite out of breath, and you're not gonna go very fast either, so you're gonna be doing rapid back and forth with no actual work getting counted on the monitor, which is like the worst thing that you can do when you're rowing. So one more time to kind of wrap up how you're supposed to row. We'll finish on a good note with how you should be doing it. Slow, catch position, shin vertical, butt behind me, chest tall, drive out, snap to the center of my chest, hands come back, reclaim my position, and then a few natural strokes. To wrap them up. So hopefully that's a good base of information. I'm not like a certified Concept 2 rower. I never rowed in the Olympics or anything fancy like that, but this is sound information about how you should be rowing. There are some nuances about some sensations that you could be feeling when you're pushing off, but that's a more detailed approach that's just too much information for a video like this. We just want to nail down the basics, get the idea about the positions you should be in, making sure you have your feet set up correctly and have your damper set correctly. And from there, we can start to worry about more and more details as you get more advanced on the rower. So let's change the camera angle now. We'll get a little closer view of this monitor and talk about how to set up a rower for intervals and how to review your information in the memory section afterwards. All right, so we've got our main menu here. This is just if you press any of the buttons, the rower is going to come on and it's going to have these options here, just row being the first one. And that's an option if, say, you just want to do a warm up, something where you're not concerned about keeping track of the results. You just want to get on that thing and start rowing. Just row is what you want. If we look down here at this third level, where it says 0M, that's going to be our units. So if I press this button here, I'm going to get different units depending on what I'm interested in. So right now it's set to 0 meters. Here at the very bottom is strokes per minute. This is going to be my pace for how long it will take me to go 500 meters based on the pace I'm going now. And then this top number, if I start rowing, is just going to count up continually and keep track of how long I've been rowing. This button here, the display, if I click that, it gives me a different view, right? So it's going to be a little bit more information. It's going to have my splits, projected 30-minute row. Strokes per minute are going to move from the bottom left up to the right, and I'm still going to have my 3 main settings here, the time I've been rowing, my 500-meter pace, and then my units for what I'm measuring, whether that's watts, calories, my 500-meter split, or meters. So if we go back now to the menu, right, if you just press menu, that takes you back to the home screen. We can go here to this second option, which is select workout. Standard workout are some pretty common rows. 2,000 meter, a very common row in rowing, 5,000 meters, 10,000 meters, or 30-minute. And so those are just some quick, easy options. If you know you're doing a 2K, that's a fast way to get to that. If we press menu, we go back one level. There's a custom list where you can kind of build these in for yourself. Re-row brings up the most recent rows that have been saved. And so you can see that's what's been rowed here recently. And if you go to new workout, this is going to be the most common one. We can see this one's nice and chalky because it's been used the most. We can do a single row. So if you wanted to do something like a 2,000 meter row, or say, hey, you wanted to do a 6K, you can set that, and then you can change your split length to whatever you want that to be, which will make it really easy to keep track of if you kept your paces throughout that row. Single time, same idea as single distance, except we're just setting a time, and our split length is going to be in time rather than distance. So the same idea as distance, but just measured in time instead. Intervals distance. So if you want to do 500 meter row, boom, I got my 500. I can use this top arrow to scoot over. I can set my rest time. I want to rest 2 minutes between each row. And I can even set a pace boat if I want to try to have something to keep up with as I go. Intervals time, same idea. Say that I program something like a 10-minute row for 3 sets with 2 minutes rest in between. You can set your 10 minutes, move the blinking cursor over, 2 minutes rest, and you're all set. And it'll just let you keep doing intervals as many times as you row. It'll just keep track of each one, and when you finally stop, or if you exit out of it, then you'll be good to go. And then finally, variable intervals. If you want to program a specific number of intervals and say that you want to do different distances every time, you can do your first interval is 500 meters. We'll rest only 1 minute, and then it'll ask you for the second interval. So you would go through that process and say you did 6 500s, and then you did 2 1000s, and then you finished with 4 250s. You can set all of that specifically, and when you have enough intervals, you just press no more intervals, and then you can start your row. So that's all of our different options for setting our distances. 1 row with the distance as the goal, 1 row with the time as the goal, consistent, just repeated of the same distance interval with a consistent rest period, consistent time rows with a consistent rest period, and then intervals variable, where you can make any combination of the same distance row with different rest periods, or different distance rows with the same rest period, or different distance and different time to rest. So that's where you can get a little more creative. Okay, so we have all of our different intervals out of the way, and when you're done with your row, we want to be able to review that information, be able to take a picture of it, log that information in our workouts so that we can keep track as we progress through each cycle. So as I'm done, I'll go to my memory, I'll select that, and I have some different options. And so, you know, the world is your oyster. How exactly you want to get to your row is up to you, but this list by date option is just going to show you the most recent row that you've done. So if you click list by date, there's the most recent row that's happened. You select it, and this is going to give you your rowing. It'll give you your time, it'll give you your distance, it'll give you your results in the units that you set while you rowed. So if you rowed with the units in calories, it'll list them that way. If you rowed with the units in watts, it will list them that way. So make sure if you're doing a 5K row test, you set your rower in meters. That way when you review the information, all your splits are shown in meters, and it makes more sense when you review that workout later. So that's the Concept 2 monitor overview. You should be able to do a quick warm-up row with the just row. You should be able to go through select lists, find your option or input your specific option for your workout, complete that row, go into the memory, list by date, find that most recent row, and get your results so that you can submit them. If you have any further questions about how to use the monitor, about rowing specific technique, about maybe how to pace, just let me know.